So I also want to congratulate the organizing team for the fantastic diverse panel that has been created here. As a moderator, I couldn't have asked for more. I'm really waiting to learn a lot in the next 1 hour from people around me. If you look around, you have travel industry represented, you have retail industry represented, you have financial services. These are the three sectors, in fact, apart from healthcare, that are leveraging generative AI to the maximum. So there is a lot to learn from these industry sectors. And then you have Gartner, which is tracking everything, and there's a lot to learn from Gartner in terms of other industries. And of course, PwC, again, providing the consultancy point of view. And we are a data and AI-led organization. We work with clients. So I think it's a perfect blend of three people who don't really get into the thick of things, but give advice from the periphery, and three people who are in the thick of things from the industry. So that's an amazing combination. So wonderful panel and that's been set up. Second, I want to say I am very jealous of you, all of you youngsters, because you are much younger to me. What I mean is, you are actually entering your career at a time when there is so much innovation happening, so much change is happening in the technology space. The power and the potential of AI is just about to get unraveled. Whatever we have seen yesterday, right? Kahani baki hai, right? So there is so much you can see happening over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years as you are in your formative years of your career and build your, all of you will go very far, and with all the knowledge and experience that you bring to the table, you have a wonderful opportunity to contribute to a very different world that's getting created. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say, two things. But the way we are going to structure this is, we'll just go around there's no tables, and each person will talk about 4-5 minutes about the topic, how we are seeing generative AI from our vantage point specifically, bring it to life with some examples, use cases, something that you can kind of relate to. And once you do that, we will just have a few questions for everyone. I will pose a few questions to the panel, and then last 15-20 minutes, we'll throw it open to you to ask some questions. Okay? So I think that's how the next 1 hour will be structured. So without further ado, let's get started. So generative AI, as you know, who doesn't know about generative AI? Haven't heard the word before in the room? Wrong question, right? So we are all using it every day in some way or the other, increasingly these days. You don't have to always use ChatGPT, even otherwise. It's AI is touching your life, and generative AI is touching your life increasingly more and more in various applications. But McKinsey estimates that this is going to contribute to global economy anywhere between $2.6 to $4.4 trillion. That's the kind of impact that we are talking about, $1 trillion, right? Just because of generative AI. Of course, there are lots of challenges to overcome, right? How does that affect privacy, for example? Are there ethical concerns? What if it goes into the wrong hands? You hear about deepfakes and how deepfakes are already creating so much of havoc. It could go into malicious hands, terrorists. What can be the potential outcome? There are lots of concerns around it, but at the same time, there are lots of opportunities also. Hyper-personalization. You get your services super personalized for what you need because there is so much of learning that the computer can make from all the data and create new experiences. For example, marketing messages. Years back, it used to be kind of, you would have a standard copywriter writing something. Today, the large language models can help you create very specialized, very focused, personalized marketing messages, which will make you buy, right? Next time you go to an Amazon, what you read might be actually very tuned to you, not something that the person sitting next to you will see. So that's the world we are living in today. And of course, there will be job displacement, but new opportunities for jobs getting created. A lot of disruption will happen, but lots of a new world order with lots of creative opportunities that will also arise from everything that's going on. So this is broad outline of what we are going to kind of cover, right? But let me then start from one corner. Maybe Amber, I'll let you speak first, and we'll go in this order. Please.
Your wish is my command. So it's too loud. Okay. First of all, good afternoon. I think, can you hear? Okay, so thanks to Manoj for setting the context. Very nicely covered, comprehensively touched upon the positives of GenAI and also some of the challenges that GenAI is going to see the light of. He was saying that next 20, 30 years, but if you ask me, next 100 years, there's going to be only two events which created history. One is COVID and another is GenAI. Next 100 years, you're not going to see anything else, right? And just pray to God that there should not be any COVID and this should remain history. So I will touch upon the topic of the privacy in GenAI. Let me start with something which we were practically working on, because we as PwC we are consultants, right? We are more into strategizing as to how business will benefit from GenAI, what are the different use cases, models to be developed, how it is to be developed, whether by LLMs that are open source available or by developing your own LLMs. These are the few strategic areas, aspects that we consult our client on. So one of a prototype that we had created, we also have a GenAI lab, just to let you know. In PwC we have a GenAI lab, and coincidentally or fortunately, whatever, we are the first enterprise buyer of OpenAI across the world. PwC globally, alright? So this, you can see in the news, it was 2 months back in the news that PwC buys OpenAI. So, I mean, obviously, some of the aspects and some of the elements. Now, I was talking about that prototype, and that prototype was for a QSR, which is quick service restaurant. And that is that what P choices a customer could be given to. And this is interesting. So what we created, a virtual lady, her name was Lisa, and say, so Lisa, you just do the prompt, right? Hey Lisa, today I'm in the mood of having tea. Lisa say, oh, is it? But yesterday you did not take the tea. Now listen to it carefully what I'm saying. Yesterday you did not take the tea. Oh yeah, I know, I did not take the tea, but today I'm in the mood of having tea. Alright, which one would you like to have? The adrak tea or elaichi tea? I said, adrak tea. Oh, adrak tea. I remember you had some cough and cold 2 months back, and that time also you had adrak tea. I said, yes. So are you facing the same problem, same health condition today? I said, no. Then why do you need adrak tea? I need adrak tea, but today I am in the mood of having adrak tea. Lisa said, oh, which means sometimes when you're not well, you are having cough and cold condition, you want adrak tea, and today you are in the mood of having adrak tea. I said, yes. Alright, so which one would you like to have? Light sugar, adrak tea, or adrak tea with some clove and tulsi patti? I said, adrak tea with some cloves and tulsi patti. Oh, is that your new choice? I said, yes. And then she said, don't worry, we'll get you an adrak tea with some clove and tulsi and light sugar. Now, this is where the privacy concern starts. Every prompt is going as a data to that data. Every prompt. When I said, yes, I want, today I'm in the mood, which means it will capture that sometimes when I'm in the mood of having adrak tea, sometimes when I'm unwell, I am having a condition of cough and cold, I want adrak tea. So all this going as my personal information, or I may call it as a PII. Have you heard about PII? Oh wow, amazing. So PII for others, it's personally identifiable information, which essentially means if I could be identified by any two attributes that can identify me as Amber, that's what is PII. Now imagine these LLMs, and as Manoj was rightly mentioning that industries like travel, industries like healthcare, these are the ones who are extensively and aggressively using GenAI because they want to give a different customer experience. And that different customer experience can't come unless you have the information about the customer. unless you have those specifics already fed into your training data. How would you get it? So next time when I'm going to ease my trip to book my tickets, it will first ask me, would you like to have the same seat which you booked last time? And that's my concern. That's my concern, or rather, that is not my concern, so long as the data remains with the OTA. But my concern is when the data goes out. Once the data goes out, then there is a problem. And why there is a problem? And that is what is important to know. Privacy is no more an individual concern. Privacy is now a state concern. It's country's concerns. I'm sure you must have heard about GDPR. GDPR? Yeah, very good. Not exactly in the lines of GDPR, but India has come out with its own Data Protection Act, which is called DPDP Act, in August 23 last year. So DPDP Act is what? It's Digital Personal Data Protection Act. Digital Personal Data Protection Act. And PwC has been fortunate to be in the whole conceptualizing of the whole act and how the act was drafted. Our team was working there. And you know, the act is so stringent that all businesses today taking individuals' information, whether it is name, cell phone number, address, choices, anything that you may think of. Anything that you may think of is being captured for the purpose of giving that customer delight, which is based on the GenAI usage within the organization. And if that goes out, then the penalty is 200 crore. It's 200 crore a penalty, 250 crore a penalty to the organization. I'm sorry, because since we have seen the draft, so the draft was 200 and by the time it came it was 250. So 250 crore is the penalty on the organization. On the organization that fails to protect the interest of that individual customers whose data has been entrusted to the organization. Imagine the seriousness. And we are talking about LLMs. We are talking about training data. We are talking about customer data. We are talking about as many attributes as possible to create that GenAI model which suits best to my business. Right? So that's where the privacy is a concern. Now, how do we address this? And I'm going back to my chai ordering to Lisa. So she was asking everything one by one. So every time, so there were two things happening. One, there was a data available which was being communicated to me as the conversation, and then there was something which was given from my side as well, as a prompt. Correct? You understand, right? Those basics, the training data, LLMs, prompts, right? So imagine how much data is being collected just by that conversation. And I'm free to say anything because I trust that particular model or that particular prototype which you created. So how do we address this? So today, if you ask me, one of the major concerns that is coming in GenAI models or the whole usage of GenAI are security, privacy, and compliances. Security, privacy, and compliances. When I say security, it's about data protection. Data protection within the organization. Who are developing the models, who are having access to those LLM data, who are having access to training data. Sometimes organizations engage third parties. You understand third parties, right? The outside vendors who come and work with you for a particular business processes. And imagine the data that's being transferred to them. Today, I'll just tell you, ever since Data Protection Act, Digital Personal Data Protection Act has come into effect, we as PwC have been receiving many calls just to do one exercise, which is data exposure to third parties. They just want to know how much data of my company is exposed to my third parties. Because I can safeguard my information, I can safeguard my data, I can put my controls. When I say controls are the mechanism to protect the data in my systems, applications, or wherever the data is lying. But how would I have control to my ecosystem of third parties where data has been shared with them as a legitimate use of the business. Right? So that's one major concern from the security side. Second is privacy. So privacy is not only for your customers, but privacy for everybody. Privacy for the employees, privacy for your own contractors who work with you, privacy for your customers, and so on and so forth. So that's second. Third is about compliance. I think EU has already, experts are sitting, EU has already come up with an AI compliance and AI protection, but that still has to get wider and the reach has to get wider. India is already working on it. I think MIT and other organizations are already involved to see that how we can create another another layer or law, or from that perspective framework that protects the interest of the customers or the interest of the individual where the PIIs are being used. So there's some methodology, I think, open source LLMs, as you're already aware, ChatGPT, Cohere, and many of them, those are there. But there are thoughts of having your own LLMs internal. All right. There's also a process called RAG, which is being put into effect these days, just to see what specific data and what specific attributes that you need to ensure that privacy is addressed. Last but not the least, see, as a student, you are the ambassador of the future innovations. And since you are going to be the ambassador of the future innovations, it is important that you learn more about the responsible use of GenAI than what the GenAI is. Because once you start getting into the thoughts and your whole channelization of your thoughts is towards the responsible use of GenAI, you start thinking, why not privacy? Why not security? Why not compliance? And probably regulations are also not far off. It's just a matter of time when things will start coming into effect. So think from that perspective. Enhance your knowledge, see what GenAI can do to the business, but it does it responsibly. Alright? Thank you.
Thank you. Next time I order chai, I'll be more careful. Alright, Himali, what do you have?
So, hello, good afternoon everyone. We were just talking about with some of your friends in the room that why are we doing these sessions and how are these sessions helping you? So the idea, and someone said it's because the technology is changing at such a fast pace and we don't want to lag behind from knowing that what is happening in the industry. So based on that, I'll just quickly share a stat. If I ask like how many papers are being published for generative AI every day, can anyone guess? So basically, I did this quite like a quick count check a few months back. Every day there are about 70 to 80 papers. Research papers are being published, more than that I believe, just on the topic of generative AI. I'm not talking about computers, quants and everything else and life sciences, just on the topic of generative AI. And that's the space, or that's the pace at which the technology is changing. I'll just start with 2010, not even before 2010. Since 2010 to 2020, the pace versus 2020 to now, it's just been explosive. So on that note, that's where I'd like to share like what I learned in the past maybe a few years. So firstly, I'll just introduce, like I work with a company called a Circle K. This is a fuel and a convenience retailer based out of US, Europe, Canada. It's a huge company, Fortune 200 company, more than $70 billion in revenue. And just to give a quick stat, we sell so we have our fuel stations and then we have convenience stores near to the fuel stations where we sell things like energy drinks or soft drinks and so on. And then in terms of, we have about 9 million customers shopping with us every day. Can I ask what is 9 million in lakhs or crores? Okay, so everybody is awake. That's the question. Wanted to check if you can do the math. But yeah, so 9 million customers, we sell more than 100 million liters of fuel every day. Not in a year, no, not in a month, every day. So it's based on a personal experience. So one of our like head of merchandising, who basically buys products for our stores, they came to us and they said that, okay, can you find out what are the trends which are like what are the emerging trends in the energy drink industry nowadays? And so based on, you know, you do AI and you talk about language models and everything, can you put across a solution which can help us do this on a regular basis? So then me and my team, we started with this. It was a long project, but then I'll quickly summarize. What happened was that we started and then we scraped the data and used the social media, Google reports and the reports from Gartner and all these different like insight companies. And then we applied complicated language models to summarize the data, generate the trends and then predict the trends. And then on that basis, we came up with a list of maybe 20 to 25 energy drinks, which are emerging trends which people are talking about a lot. And that's where we said, okay, these are the energy drinks which you should keep in the stores. Now, in that list, there was one interesting thing. There was a drink named as Hell AI. Hell AI. And we were all very curious and we thought, okay, we'll check what is this drink. So upon checking, we realized that this drink so there is a company, Hungarian company by Hell Energy. They launched this drink. They did a lot of research and then on the basis of generative AI, by using the generative AI, they came up with a formula for that energy drink, wherein they said that the designer drink which will appeal to youngsters, which will be very cool and it should have like good in vitamin, mineral content and so on. And based on that, they had formulated, they had designed the bottle by using AI, by using generative AI, and then all of that marketing for Hell AI was also done by generative AI. And that was the thing where I felt like, okay, AI is looking at itself in the mirror, because we were saying that we want to figure out emerging trends using generative AI, and then in the end we came up with a product which was itself generated with the generative AI. So I've talked, I think I've said like 50 times the word generative AI, but it's true. It is true, that is what is happening. So in this whole story, what I have tried to cover is two important use cases, which the CPG, the consumer product group companies, and the retailers are using. The CPG companies are doing a lot of the research and development using generative AI. The retail companies like us are doing a lot more things using AI or generative AI. But then one of the quick example is this, that doing some qualitative research, which might have taken long hours, and then exploring the data, exploring the web and the social media, we were able to do this using language models. So these are just two examples. I believe we'll be talking about much more examples, but also the fact that what are the challenges when we come to implementation of this at an enterprise scale. Like the company like us, the implementation is also a huge challenge, so we'll talk more about it.
Thank you. I think today we are living in a world we can't say something is created by AI or, right? I mean, at least all of us are really created, I believe, not through AI. Tomorrow we won't be able to say that. Right, so, but very interesting example. Mali, thank you.
Okay. So first and foremost, thank you so much everyone for inviting me here. And I just want to talk about my perspective. Had wonderful discussions from Amber and about the circle case stories. What I would want to bring more perspective is I imagine me sitting there on the bench a couple of years back from the MBA Institute, and now I'm sitting here. So I would want to talk about things that you are doing and giving you a bit of a peek in the industry, a bit more closer peek from the sort of perspective that I have. And if I talk about GenAI perspective, I broke it down into two pieces that you how it came into existence. And if I talk about, I'll take you a bit back from the evolution of GenAI. It all started somewhere in 1980s, right? When the Turing test happened. And just a heads up, I'm a really technology evangelist sort of thing, so you probably get more tech things from me, apart from all the business use cases. So just a heads up for that. So that's the Turing test that started in 1980s. Then the neural networks came by, post which we have these transformer models in 2014 by Google. And then going back to these LLM 2017, and we are in the 2020 era of GPT series model. So GPT series, also known as GenAI models, right? Generative pre-trained transformer models is what we call in here. The GenAI models is what you know as OpenAI models, LLM, Meta, Llama AI, Claude, all of these, right? Same DNA, but focused towards different sort of entities that we want to solve. So the point is that we are hearing a lot of GenAI, but if you talk from the tech standpoint, it's been there for ages. Right? It's just come to light because it has got more commercialized and easily accessible to everyone, because anyone can open chat AI and type in some prompt and get some answers, right? So that is how easily accessible it is. And this is what I bring it back to what Manoj was pointing out in the initial start of the session, where he was saying that I envy you guys because you have everything at your disposal, right? So I'm going to talk about two more lenses on these, how business is using this as a technology, or basically the industries, and also on the business operations side and also on the side of workplace. So business operations side, if I talk about a couple of use cases that I've seen, I'll talk more from the lens of India as a country and the business in the India context. A particular use case is we see a lot of teleselling happening, teleselling was for that matter. Right, a lot of people calling you for credit cards or what sort, loans and all, so that's pretty much the financial services background that I'm talking of, right? But there's a huge application of GenAI that's been evolving around that era, right? So if you look at the overall conversion that happened, is nearly less than 1% of the overall volumes happening. But there's a huge cost that's been involved in terms of making those calls happen. But how these GenAI models are being used is basically looking at all those transcriptions and seeing which customer would work, what will not work, and basically tuning and coming up with the right themes and scripts to reach out to people. Again, coming back to what Manoj was pointing out earlier, right? So that's how the use cases, how it's developing around the areas where a huge models, large language models are being used to come up with those sort of approaches. And in fact, we did that, right? So we call it CRM models, right? And we basically use it in terms of targeting the right set of people with the right set of themes. You might have also looked at, so if I talk about GenAI, so it's also being used for marketing collaterals. When I say marketing collaterals, how to reach out to people and in what sort of patterns, right? You heard about segmentation, like how you do segmentations, probably a high profile customer versus a high medium profile customers, low profile customers. But then within those segments also you have different personas of people, right? Certain who would be more interested in if you talk to them about in an emotional context. Couple of them in a different educational context, right? So different ways of how to engage your customers so that there's a strong bond and there's a strong relationship that you are trying to get to the customer. So that is the level at which the companies are working these days. So that's more around the business operations side and getting more in the creative side. So the application that I've seen so far is on the creative lens in terms of coming up with the marketing collaterals, streamlining the efficiencies, reducing the overall tag time, automating the processes, right? So that's how we have seen this. If I bring it down to the workplace application, so when I say workplace applications, how does the adoption of GenAI happen within teams or within the industry? Again, so as I'm saying, so there are two ways of putting it to use. One is getting it to enterprise level use and you put it into action so that it is accessible to your clients. The other is you can also make them useful within your organization, right? Upskilling your team, which is a serious concern and a serious agenda if you talk about. So leading teams, I've seen people, it's very difficult to find the right set of people to get the job. But with the sort of tools you have, what I would say, upskilling is a bit easy, not exactly, but yes, it's been used as a tool for upskilling, where you can have these Gen AI as a mentors and help them answer you a couple of things. But be cautious when I say that not everything is right. So yes, it will get you 80 to 90% close unless you're talking about very things specific. So those couple of things is what we're using in terms of getting the into the workplace fit. And at a holistic level, if I talk about the overall technology phases that I see it, or it's also very generic. Whenever a new technology comes up, you have predominantly 5 or 6 stages if I talk about. Right? So the ones, the innovators, right, who will just start looking at whatever you throw at them. Second is early adopters. They need to have few use cases before they actually move on to them. Then early majority followed by late majority, and then you have your levels. And what I believe with Gen AI, we are predominantly into major majority or laggard space. For that matter, what I'm saying is, what I feel is, that's my personal opinion in this phase that I am working. The question is no more about whether to use Gen AI or not. The question is more about which Gen AI tool to be used for your respective case. So yeah, so that is something I have that I wanted to share with the group. And thank you so much for the opportunity. We'll have more questions and thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. In fact, you talked about enterprise applications, right? But if you look at it, the potential is infinite. For example, you can have a career coach or a wellness coach coming from AI, which is like people who are highly stressed and organized. This could be great tools because highly personalized tools that can be deployed. Right? So much potential out there, Over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible properly? So, a lot of good thoughts have been shared so far. I would like to talk some important aspect about how this generative AI model is working, what is behind it, right? You must be using ChatGPT, etc. for some of your learning experiences. Are you guys using it? So what do you think? How does it producing so much informative content? What is going inside that model? What is the fuel for that model? Data. Absolutely right. So all the generative AI, all the artificial intelligence model that today we are seeing into is powered by the fuel that is data. So as you know, if your car is run by petrol and if the quality of petrol is not good, if it has a lot of pollutants, then your car will not run well. The same thing happens with the generative AI model. In case you do not provide good quality of data, you will see a lot of noise and a lot of bad output. And so understanding that for any kind of use case, any of the companies around the world working, it is very essential that the quality of data remains good. I'll give you some example, right? So recently, I think it's 6 months or 1 year back news. So Google used Reddit data. So it bought Reddit data and it used it to train some of the generative AI model. I'll give you an example. So there's everyone eat sandwich sometime, right? Cheese sandwich. So generally, if you put the bread in between, the sandwich sticks itself because of the cheese. So few users, just for fun, written in the post that add some glue and it will stick well and you will eat it well. So they were just typing with friends and then. So some of the users when they search for the recipe for cheese sandwich, they found it's bread, cheese, glue. So glue is the ingredient for this. So of course, right? So that's not the true case. But if someone new reading it, they may try it, and absolutely you should not try it. So this is just an example, right? If the data is not good, how bad impact it can create. And we are talking about use cases. I'm coming from a financial services industry. So we deal with a lot of confidential information, we deal with a lot of fraudulent activity that's happening in the payment space. Every day you are doing debit card transactions, credit card transactions. So in case the data is not good, maybe we will not be able to create the right decision. Also today, in this today modern world where we are getting a lot of generated AI outputs for creating images, for creating text, for creating videos, there are a lot of deep fake content that's coming up. Recently, in one of the tweets, there's a very famous election going on in one of the biggest economy in the world, US, right? So the key presidential candidates, Trump and Kamala, is there. So one of the candidates, I'm not sure whether it came from their tweet handle, but the tweet came that Taylor Swift is supporting Trump. And that was a deepfake image that was used. Then Taylor Swift had to come in front of the media that okay, no, this is not my post. So think about that post, right? That deepfake post can be used by some of the model as a main data, and it can become the real news. So the deepfake data, which is a wrong data, can be consumed by model to create more and more and more wrong news. Similarly, a wrong image, a wrong text, a wrong article can create wrong information. For example, today you are doing some assignment, you are trusting ChatGPT is producing the right output. But how will you ensure it, right? For that ChatGPT, the model that is trained, they have to ensure that the quality of data is good. So how some of the industry experts are doing, I'll give 2 minutes highlight on that front, that how some of the industry experts are ensuring that quality of data is good and output is good. So after generating the outputs, each of the firms are trying to check the output through humans lens. Hundreds and thousands of individuals hours are consumed in which they review the output of the AI model and just tick or mention that the output is user friendly or correct or not. By adopting these best practices, this is called, so through this human intervention, you are able to ensure that the models are producing right output. And as you grow in your career, like you start doing job and you become business leaders in the future. So it's important for you to understand as well that whatever business problem you are working, the business and solution is important, but what going inside into it, it's also very important. So on that note, I'll pass it on.
And you touched upon a very important theme, Dinesh, about data. And I'll just give you one perspective from what I'm seeing in EXL. In the last 5 years, we acquired 3 data management companies. Latest being a company called ITA Data this last month. Because we were always focused on analytics, data science, modeling, and all of that. But the real demand from our client side is fixing the data. And that's a huge ocean of mess. And unless it's junk in, junk out. Unless you clear that out, whatever great tool you have in AI, it's not going to work. So we have been focused actually on acquiring that capability, and it's paying off at the end of the day, right? So Manoj, want to hear from your perspectives.
Thank you very much. First time, second time interacting with the Gen Z audience. So, I think a lot of information we're supposed to provide. I think about the Gen AI, we talk about, my co-parents already talk about much. But I'll take you to 2 decades before, what exactly we met 2 parents. One is computerization, second is automation. So, what is Gen AI? Today we talk about Gen AI is basically the 2 baby of automation. Is a new version or new buzzword you can say. Especially we realize that maybe AI, Gen AI is not newborn baby, but we realize after pandemic the usability of Gen AI, what is the importance of Gen AI. I tell you, AI is a elder brother of Gen AI. I remember 2022, just after pandemic, we talking about AI, ML. This is what AI, how we can utilize in day-to-day life. We already have a call center. I little experience, let's have an AI ML utilizing call center. Believe me, it's more than 2 years. And today AI is history. And trust me, AI giving the power of AI basically converted your interaction with the customer. Your call center interaction is 15% less today. Whatever repeat information, whatever you calling to customer, any of the customer call center, 15% call is handled by AI. And that is the first time I can see you power of AI. Now we add couple of more information, little bit giving the other thing on AI, which now Gen AI. Now I can say, proudly say, Gen AI is going to be change life next 5 years. Your automation process internally, externally is going to be tremendous change in this. At least why we are using it today. I take an example, especially in my travel industry. Travel industry very dynamically works. When you travel from, let's suppose, Delhi to London, you book the flight from airline website, OTA website, mobile application, wherever. Today, people are very smart, they have multiple options to book the flight. But as a common man, we don't know when you're going London or any other location, what kind of visa required, what kind of we have to travel, what flight is cheaper, when we have to book. Those information not available in public domain. Here, Gen AI can utilize very well. When you just create one prompt, Gen AI is given tons of data with your hand. Where you going, make sure you're landing in the particular airport. You require this type, this kind of visa, 20 visa, business visa. And after pandemic, trust me, worldwide most of the airport have a landing information. You are vaccinated or not vaccinated. Lot of medical certificate they require. Those things as a public domain, we don't know which is required, which airport they want. We are vaccinated or particular country or not. Those information given by Gen AI. When you book the ticket, you're giving the fraud information, you're going to particular country, you make sure this information should be handled. That's the power of Gen AI. Now, in personal life also, you can see mobile phone. Just 2 years back, we are using smartphone, but now, today, a smartphone guiding you, your personal behavior, when you wake up, when you writing something to text, giving Gen AI, giving information, what information is supposed to write, when you write, whom you write, those information very handy. And Gen AI, you never know, knowingly, unknowingly, they're giving, highlighting you what is time, what is behavior you keeping in your mobile phone. I would say it's a very, very positive signal, but make sure, as we talking about data privacy of the individual, this is very, very important. You can Google it today, your personal information is already there. Google is keeping track about each every moment. It is up to you that information you want to share or not. So when we talking about particular Gen AI, we make sure what information we are sharing in the public domain, and when we talk about in the corporate world, we make sure that we are the data privacy, PI information be protected, and we should take care of the compliance. When we talk about GDPR, we already implement GDPR. But trust me, this all regulation already there, specific for country-specific compliances. But this compliance not 100%. I give you an example. My portal, our portal is Matrix or any portal basically. Most of people, any country, they can, any citizen, they can book the flight or hotel or anything. You cannot stop them because at .com side, public side, basically European citizen also can book the flight. But as per GDPR guideline, says you have to keep the data of the person data in an encrypted form. And after using your data or data where it is over, you pass the data, delete the data physically. But this is a catch. Why? Because the person is travel with you, they book flight with you, and you have to keep the data. Even after departure of flight, we need the data. Why? Because you never know. After 90 days, somebody charged back. Then charge back. MasterCard company also says, hey, this is my customer. He's saying, I have not done this booking. And somebody else, behalf of my done booking, so I have got right to take my money back. In that case, whether MasterCard, Visa, anybody, we have to prove them. This is a guy, this is a boarding card, this is a booking number, this is a PNR number. We have to prove them as a document, yes, person is traveled. That is why we need a data. So, I'm saying every country have a compliance, every country have regulation. I respect that. But again, that information should be very micro level information. What should be consortium data? Who is the processor of data? This should be very, very clear. That's we talking about DPDP. DPDPA came, I think, last year, September. Now still we are debating, government of India is still debating how to fine tune the DPDP Act. 250 crore penalty, but who bear the penalty? Either data custodian or data processor, because our data, we dealing with the lakhs of lakhs business partner, which is a B2B partner, they also working with us, and we are consumer and we are data controller as well as data processor. So is a dual responsibility carried today whenever we process the personal information of the customer. So we have a dual responsibility. We have to compliance one side. We have a firstly of data. We have to store data in an encrypted form. This is very, very important. And second is of course using the GenAI, ML, all those things. We should be ahead of the competition, and we keep innovating wherever we want. That's all my.
Thank you, Manoj. I think it's a fantastic the whole perspective on the constant battle that we have, right, with the compliance, with at the same time making the most of the data. I think that's what we're all going through, that with the data explosion and the power of what if it goes to terrorists, the fraudsters, the wrong hands. It's a constant, and I can't be enemy of a CIO who has to take care of all of that for the company, especially in the travel industry, right? Fantastic. I think I'm just conscious of time. We have about 10-12 minutes left. So what I would do now is throw it open to the audience so that we can have questions. I'm sure many of you have lots of questions. So let's structure. I think lots of hands raised. So I think I saw your hand first, please.
Hi everyone. I'm out.
Yes.
Yeah, so good afternoon.
Yeah.
So my name is Rohan Verma. I'm from MBA Business Analytics. So my question is, as organizations these days are using AI for decision makings. So as it can sideline human intuitions, judgment, and could lead to decisions that lack creativity. So what organizations are doing or can do to cater to these challenges?
Okay. Who wants to pick it up?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. The challenges.
Organizations are adopting AI for decision making. So as it can sideline human intuitions, judgments, and that could lead to decisions that lack creativity. So what organizations are doing or can do to cater to these challenges?
How do you ensure there is still creativity and machines take over?
I'll start and then please read. Alright. So that's where I talk about my point of view. So we call AI as like artificial intelligence, but nowadays there is a term which is there where we call it as augmented intelligence. It's not. I'll not say that we will, in any time soon, will be in a scenario wherein the entire life cycle of any decision would only be done by AI. It is always, there is always a human feedback in the loop. Even if I talk about ChatGPT or maybe Gemini or any models, they give you two drafts and then you say which one do you like and all. So there is always a human feedback loop involved. So with that, like that whole concept of the learning using human feedback, it ensures that the creativity is not sidelined. That's one thing. The second thing I'll also say that in terms of these models, that the background of these models is the data which already exists. So it is creating new information, but then the base is already existing information and it is summarizing. So a lot of the use cases or applications which big industries are adopting nowadays are for cases wherein we can automate or we can streamline the tasks and we can summarize. So not really, I would say like creativity would actually like absolutely get sidelined.
Very useful and valid points brought out by Himali. I'll just add on to what she said. See, there is always a problem of a biased outcome from GenAI, right? And as everything is based on the data it is being trained on, so there is a challenge. Let's accept, yes, there is a challenge. But can GenAI replace human creativity? The answer is no, because GenAI itself is created by humans. Right? So it cannot replace human creativity because a lot of things, lot of content also involves a virtual human emotion that GenAI cannot bring in. Right? You can use words, but which word is to be used for a particular context that GenAI cannot bring in? Probably if it is so well trained data and so strong that is every prompt that you put in and the outcome is very good. So what organizations are doing, they are working on structured data and non-structured data. Non-structured data is where it is maximum being leveraged, and this non-structured data is being put in the form of data link and so on and so forth. So there, what is being done just to avoid these challenges, as you said, that creativity or probably wrong outcome or bias, as I said, these are being reduced at least at the internal organization level. Not for something which is for public use, right? So there are enough data around it. Thank you.
Who's next?
I am Pranav from MBA Business Analytics Excel. So my question is directed towards Amber sir and Manoj sir. So both of you mentioned DPDPI, but there was a argument in the parliament also when this act was formed about the MNCs that are working on it. Like PwC is collecting my information. It can't use it in the Indian frame, but the LPG policies of India allows the MNC to use the data in the foreign realm. So how can that be overcome the problem of privacy and everything?
Okay, so good question. First of all, DPDP Act, as Mr. Manoj Shrivastava was also mentioning, a lot of refinement of the rules are being done. So let me just put that perspective because you are students, so it's good to explain some theories and academics. So DPDP Act is a law, right? And law is to be abided by. And law cannot be so descriptive that everything is written as to what is to be done on the ground. Law is more directive, right? You do this, you don't do this. If you don't do this, then this will happen. That's what is law, right? Now, that law is already passed last year, August 2023, and law is into effect. Law also says, like, let me go back to the example of what Mr. Manoj Shrivastava said. So somebody sitting in Europe booking a ticket through EasyMyTrip, right? And that comes under the purview of GDPR. Why? Because GDPR says any citizen, any European Union citizen sharing the information being in Europe to any entity or any organization is to be protected through GDPR. DPDP Act says all Indian citizens' personally identifiable information shared within India or to the businesses or to any entity. Also, the businesses who are from outside operating in India will come under the purview of DPDP Act, right? So that's clear. Now, can you say that any Indian citizen's data can go out? The answer is yes, but then all the controls of DPDP Act will apply. Two, it also protects the right of the individual by saying, hey, my data cannot be misused. So there is something called consent management. And consent management is the major problem, challenges which all the organizations are facing today, and this is the government of India is continuously working to see how the consent management can be made easy. I'll give you a very small example. The largest or the biggest problem is being faced by Facebook, Meta. Why? Because they have the PII of many children under 18. And for that, DPDP Act clearly says there has to be a parental consent. Now, which essentially means a parent has to go to Facebook and say, okay, this is my kid's offspring's data and this is to be protected. Or probably now it's over, you delete it. That's what is considered, that's my right. In AI parlance, that right to delete is a big problem. Big problem. And that's what is being talked about. So right to delete, applying right to delete in LLMs because LLMs works on the data and then going into that LLM model, whole training data and deleting it is a big challenge. But this is where such acts, when they get passed, the final rules are supposed to come. It's a matter of 2 to 3 weeks or maybe a month's time when Government of India will release the rules and these will become easier. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think you already defined the DPDP Act, but DPDP Act is nothing talking about technical part of that. It is maintaining a discipline, rules for any organization, what type of data you process, how you store it. That's it. But it's up to you. You creating LLM, you writing in a cloud or on-prem is up to you. This is maintaining your discipline because nowadays, after GDPR, most of country have a compliances, most of country have a own act based on their customer. That's today trend. Singapore also have their own privacy guideline. So likewise, you can see every country coming with their own regulations, and we have to maintain if we are carrying those country data in. I would like to. I'd like to add one more thing. Today we talk about AI. Now we talk about Gen AI. I tell you, very soon you can see EI, emotional intelligence, going to be inbuilt in Gen AI. Then Gen AI probably look like a human. I would not say human exactly, but behave like a human. I can say most of, maybe in India also, there are robotic, behave like a human. So, like a small piece of EI also inbuilt now. And वो दिन दूर नहीं है, then robotic like behave like human.
Yeah, no, that would be the day when we'll be talking to a room filled with half of AI students, right? So, with emotional intelligence, everything.
I hope
So,
Candice also do.
yeah, half of it, right? Yeah. Okay, so I know we are overrunning, but great questions. Why don't we take just 2 more questions, right? Yes.
Good afternoon, parents. I am Shrimesh Chadha from MBA Business Analytics as well. And I have earlier been an economics student as well, and as we all know that economy can only grow when anything that comes up or any innovation that comes up trickles down to every section of the society. With AI, especially I'm talking about the Indian context, is that some people ask all the students use AI regularly and do the industry leaders. But there is also a section of the society that doesn't even know the technical know-how of a computer or let alone the the industry leaders should. What are your views on this, and how should we solve this problem of bringing all the people together when talking about in terms of AI? So I just like views of all of you, what I use, especially in the area.
So maybe I can just quickly start with a couple of points here, right? So see, that's the big challenge and the big opportunity. How do you take this to the masses? Not everyone needs to be well versed in Python and coding and all that. You have voice to text. You have lots of technologies today. And in fact, Microsoft, I think I'm forgetting the name of that initiative. Where they actually getting thousands of villagers across rural India to tag in vernacular languages, data tagging, bashing, yes, that's right. So they're actually tagging, creating these data tags in vernacular languages, Telugu or Oriya or Marathi, using villagers from across thousands of villages, and that's created huge employment opportunity. For example, this is again that data tags are very important for creating the right AI systems in vernacular languages. You are creating employment opportunities there. Similarly, if you look at UPI, India is leading ahead of this. I'm not talking about AI, but look at the way Dhelawala also uses UPI. So that is not some complicated technology that only people who have high technical skills can use. You open your phone and QR code and you pay. It's pervasive now, especially in our country and other countries are adopting it. Similarly, there is huge potential for innovation to take it to the rural India, to the masses, and create employment opportunities there.
I wanted to add to that by saying that what I feel like, I looked at a couple of reports, like India is a huge consumption market in terms of if you look at mobile devices, right? So right now all these Gen AI models are predominantly being used probably through a desktop application or maybe over the web, right? But they are getting integrated to your now these chats as well. So if you look at WhatsApp, you do have those Meta AI coming to those, right? So the next thing is integration into your consumer apps, which is the organizations that predominantly already started doing it. So if you open your bank apps, you probably have AI assistant here, right? So by taking it to masses, the way I see it, there was a beautiful speech from India government like BBNL, Bharat Broadband Network Limited, in terms of taking the internet to the gram panchayats and all. So that was a stepping stone in terms of making the technology available to the masses. Now since we have the foundational infrastructure already there, the next step is to have the mobile devices, which I see is also the next step closely there. Because falling on the CD or consumer durable loans coming from the industry, the way I see it, in the rural industry there's a huge demand for it and there are people taking it. So once you have these two phases already covered, the next step is the usability of those. And which is where it's going to come up by integration into the consumer apps, and which you're going to see the next step very soon. So I'm sorry,
Yeah, I think fairly pointed, and just to add, right, I think AI eventually will, so to use AI, the basic aspect is getting literacy. So countries like which are more developed, it's easier to leverage those apps. So for example, in our country, there is that is basic challenges there. In Africa, the challenge is more. So the countries which are developing, these kind of challenges are more. So I think focusing there first on the literacy aspect and then leveraging the higher needs would be important, and the organization generally try to focus on those first and then leveraging AI for product needs. Yeah.
Okay, as promised, one last question.
So hello everyone, I'm Keshav Reddy from MBA Business Analytics. I want to ask the panel, have organizations thought of any upper limit of integrating AI within businesses, that this is where we stop, thus far and no more?
Oh, sorry. Very good question. So, frankly speaking, I was working with, not to name of course, but with a credit card business, and somebody thought that now it's important that we start bringing in Gen AI everywhere, across the functions, and the use cases started getting developed everywhere. like whether it was customer service, whether it was some of the HR functions, sales function, and so on and so forth. But you know what? It somehow created a chaos. Why it created a chaos? Because ultimately, the sole objective of creating a use case at the business level was not. When individual functions started thinking, it's important that we should bring GenAI, and every function head was given the liberty to bring in GenAI. And we were interacting with them. For us, it was a big business. But at the same time, we went to the board. We did the presentation to the board. And we said, hey, stop. Probably we are going overboard. While GenAI is good, it's important to imbibe, it's important to adopt. At the same time, it is important to understand what exactly is the benefit this particular GenAI model or use case is going to bring to the business. Think about it. Let's start thinking strategically what currently is a bigger problem. So if customer service is a bigger problem, let's pick up customer service first. Understand how this particular GenAI model is helping customer service become better. And then we'll go to the next step. So this is where some caps are being put and decisions are being taken more strategically as to where to bring in GenAI.
Thank you. I think we'll close and we'll pass it on to the.
On behalf of
So, on behalf of you, I want to ask question, one very valid question for my panelist. GenAI take a job for future?
A very valid question, and I've been hearing a lot. So I would like to say there's a lot of myth versus truth. So, like how I would like to answer is, yes, there will be some job displacements that will happen, but you have tools at your disposal to upskill yourself, right? And they are moving in the right direction. So, like as sir already mentioned, so like there's a lot of piece of automation. So like repetitive tasks going out of your way, and humans are getting to focus more on strategic and important tasks. And here there was an argument or question around creativity as well, but with GenAI coming into picture, it gives you more options as an alternative, right? And also to comment on to that, like with GenAI, you write a prompt, right? If I break it down, so prompt has task, instruction, context, and input. All of these components is given by a human. Unless you put that in, you won't get a creative output. And then after the creative output, those outputs are evaluated again by a human, whether they should go through or not. And once let's say in a business term, you have two outputs, they go through an A/B testing. Whichever gets you the higher ROI, that gets you through. So again, coming back to the point, I feel that it is a right move in the right direction at the right time for the country and for an individual to move. And basically the turnaround time in terms of upskilling is what I see is going to go down. So people can move and change their career, move from one skill to the other, and all of that's going to be very fast. That's how I see it. That's my perspective. Thank you.
Can I just add one line because I know it's going to. So, sir, to answer your question, it will displace some jobs, but at the same time, it will start creating better professionals. It will create better careers, and I'm very sure that the largest population is going to be employed. It's not that, so job displacements will happen. Some mundane jobs will get terminated, but the new jobs will created will require more brain than just be into subconscious and working something like driving. That's all.
Okay, so let's close here. Thank you, all the panelists for wonderful. I learned a lot in the last 1 hour 15 minutes, and I was watching all of you. Very few people slept. I know who they are, but mostly all of you are very attentive. So thank you for being back. Back to you.